Jaeden, one of these days we are going to have the Apple episode that ends all Apple episodes that says Apple has come out and they've conquered everything. I don't know if this is this, Jaeden, but I'll tell you this, that for the size of Siri, right? The sort of like the implications of everybody having an iPhone in their hand, and I do mean like everybody on the planet, basically. Any news that comes out about Siri, and especially any news that comes out about Apple and China, actually has implications for, I think, for our audience as well. And so the two things I want to dive into today that I was really fascinated by was, number one, the Wall Street Journal was just talking about this this whole idea that Apple's in talks to pay publishers to improve AI-powered Siri. So this has been an ongoing discussion about like how are these models trained, et cetera. So I think that that's absolutely huge, because if Siri can be up to date on stuff and people can actually lean into Siri rather than going outside Siri, that friction just disappears. But then second of all, they're leaning into China. What is happening here? You were sort of like telling me about this story. I had completely missed this story. Where do you want to sort of like start on this? Because I can't tell what the bigger story is right here.
Okay, like let's talk about the China thing first. I think this is really interesting because basically, so China has trained a custom AI model with Alibaba. Not just like in America when Siri comes out, you're gonna be able to pick like, oh, I want Anthropic, or I want ChatGPT, or I want Gemini. You'll be able to pick kind of like picking your your search engine on a browser. You'll be able to pick what AI model powers Siri in some ways. And I think Apple has some of their own kind of custom stuff in there. But there's, you'll be able to kind of get outside of that, and they got partnerships. But anyways, that'll be a little bit a la carte, which is cool. In China, of course, none of the American models are allowed. They're all banned in China. Right. So what Apple's gone and done is they haven't just said, okay, we're going to grab Qwen and DeepSeek and Kimi K3, which, I mean, in my brain, that's what they would do. They actually custom trained their own model with Alibaba in partnership with them, which is interesting because that makes Apple the very first U.S. company that is approved to offer a proprietary AI model inside of China. This is all coming ahead of the Apple Intelligence rollout. So that is a very fascinating concept to me. And I mean, I have all sorts of great conspiracy theories that are popping up in my head in relation to this. But I do think just on its head, that headline alone, that's a big moment. This is the first American company that is able to actually roll out their own AI model inside of China.
Especially when you consider sort of like how close China is. I mean, and people who don't know, I mean, it's not like when we talk about, and I was on this news show the other night, sort of like talking about this, about like whether or not, what do we think about, Bernie Sanders and others sort of saying like we should slow down AI technology bills and everything here. And my point, and I think a lot of people's point, is that like that would be, I think, a literal national security risk, right? Because China, and the interesting thing about this story with Apple and China especially, is that China is unbelievably guarded with how it's not that things are national. I don't understand the Chinese economy as well as others, but like it's not exactly that things are nationalized, but like, my gosh, like, I mean, China, like the Chinese government knows everything that's going on, and they are pushing this. And when you sort of see a model like Kimi 3 or something like that, like these very powerful AI models, and people say like China's coming. Now, people have been saying China's coming for a few years in the same way they've been saying open source has been coming for, and when I say coming for, I mean the frontier models. I mean like, let's call it Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google at the moment. So whether these models, like even with Chinese backing, sort of like will surpass, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to look like an idiot. I sort of still am believing in sort of like the U.S. based ones. But when you think about the reach that Apple has, and especially the Apple AI story in the United States is, I mean, not to sort of like overstate it, but it's almost non-existent, right? I mean, like, because anybody that tries Siri, it's like the problem when people are trying to adopt ChatGPT, one of the big problems that people have is that they tried it when everybody else tried it, which is, let's call it March 2023. And what was happening back there? It was hallucinating like crazy. So basically you're saying like, hey guys, guess what? We have a better search engine. The problem is about half the time it's going to like lie to you. And people are like, what possible good is that? So the problem that Apple has, I think, is that people, it's sort of like the Apple Maps problem, right? People try it, they're like, nope, never. I mean, Apple Maps set back Apple a decade, right? Like it was unbelievable. And so now if Apple sort of already has that reputation in the US, like they can't really do it, will people turn to Siri? I don't know. But is China more of a green field, number one? Number two, because China has a lot of people, in case people haven't been sort of like paying attention. The other thing is that what Siri is doing in terms of loop, sort of like bringing in content, is a really interesting model, because they are trying to improve Siri in the, let's call it the Western world, right? And sort of like in the US especially. But also that model of that is interesting, right? Because the way that they're doing it is that they would pay for content on demand. And I know that those sound like kind of like two separate stories. Before we got on, guys, just for transparency's sake, when Jaeden and I were kind of like thinking about this, we're like, okay, so is this a this story or is it this or this story? And we're like, I think this could be related. It's how is Apple going to sort of like make a comeback to actually convince people to use Apple AI, but also how do they lower the friction? First of all, maybe in China, second of all, in the US, where it just feels like it's healthy, it feels like it's helpful, and it feels like it's something that people can access like right away so that they are not jumping over to Anthropic or OpenAI or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. So in particular, what's interesting to me is that Apple got this registered with China's cybersecurity regulators last month. So, I mean, that's a massive hurdle. And the reason why, because previously, like Siri has had, I mean, different AIs or ChatGPTs, or they've done some like rollouts and some stuff with Apple Intelligence over the last few years, although nothing has been super exciting. But with all that, in China, they actually have been using local Chinese models. Like you were able to use like the DeepSeeks and Qwen and like, those types of companies to power it. But for this in particular, what they're trying to do is create an on-device model, which is interesting. So in order to do that, they need to make their own model. And what's even more interesting is that Alibaba is like the biggest AI model. I think Qwen is the biggest AI model in China right now. But in this particular relationship, Alibaba is described as a quote unquote training partner. So it's not the model vendor. They're not just grabbing Qwen and putting it on there, which would kind of be easy and would make sense. They actually used Alibaba because it's kind of like AWS in China. It's got like a huge cloud, right? So they actually used them as the training partner. Alibaba helped them create their own model, which is really interesting. So I think Apple and Alibaba, neither of them have really talked too much about this, but we had some reporting that Routers came out with that kind of talked about this. But for all of that, the reason why this has to happen right now is because Apple, they have a ton of competition in China right now. The biggest competitors are Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, and Vivo. Those are the big Chinese phone companies. And all of those have generative AI features inside. So like on device, they'll like summarize your email, or they'll do things on device, similar to like in America. If you're not on an iPhone, you're probably on some sort of Android device. So we have like Gemini doing a lot of that kind of stuff in America. So in China, it's really important though, if the iPhone doesn't have an on-device AI model, it's just not going to get used. I wish that we're doing this for America too, but apparently it's big deal for China. So I guess Americans will get something good out of it as well, hopefully, because China gets it.
Okay, well, will they though? So let me just ask you this then, because like this kind of like spins off into a third point of this conversation. This is why, guys, like again, a lot of times the stories that we talk about on the show they're fairly linear. This one feels like it's forking all over the place, Jaeden, because it leads me into an even more interesting, not more interesting discussion, but just a more interesting, bigger point, which is, we've kind of mentioned this before. The on-device thing has been a talking point since 2023. It's like the models are simply too big to have on there. And I think we mentioned this before on a previous podcast, but like, you remember when it was like GPT-4 and people kept saying like, and GPT-4 ruled the roost for 10 months, right? A year? Like it was crazy, right? Like it was GPT-4 or nothing. And the idea was like, well, as soon as we get like a GPT-4 style model, then that can be on device, and then you have total privacy. You can just have it on your iPhone. Like it's super fast, so it's always connecting. But most importantly, you can just like upload whatever you want, the most literal personal things you want, because it's a closed system. You're not sort of sending it out to the cloud. Nobody can train on it, etc. And I think what people found out very quickly was nobody wanted that, because there was always the better model on the cloud. So even now, again, like when I guess it was Opus 4.5 or whatever came out in November or something like that, I was like, I'll never need anything more powerful than this. And now there's like Fable. Like Opus 5 even feels like, I don't know, compared to Fable. So the point is that like people are so eager. I'm talking about people like us, right? Are so eager for the latest thing. But we do not represent most of the planet, right? Most of the planet is happy to have just like a very, very smart Siri, which even GPT-4 would be. So is it your position here that like what they're going to learn from China in terms of having an on-device model, do you think that will gain traction in the US, or do you think people here will always want just the latest thing that will never fit on device?
I think Apple's actually in the US, and I should be fact checked on this, but I believe they have a few like on devicey sort of micro AI things that happen, like maybe their image generator, maybe that's also cloud generated. So I could be wrong about that, but they've certainly talked about it a lot. So it's definitely the direction that they'd want to take. I think that at the end of the day, even if they're severely, not as powerful as the best model, I still think that there's a massive use case. Like at the end of the day, summarizing an email, it's interesting. I have like, for a bunch of random reasons, I have one business email that was on like a server, and I just have so much I have so much like traffic, so many people like talking there. I haven't ported it over to Google Workspace yet with all like my other business emails, and I don't want to because like sometimes there's like a little delay in emails, and I don't want to miss anything. It's like highly important, so I have it on this random service right now that was like tied to a web hosting thing. Anyways, their like service has this like email summary tool, which is most definitely not as good as whatever else I get in Gemini or ChatGPT or anything else. But I'm going to be honest, because I'm so used to using like Gemini to just like, okay, like polish this email.
Sure.
And I use this other one that's clearly not as powerful. And honestly, it is 90% good. I still don't touch it. Is it perfect? Is it as amazing? Is the tone just exactly how I want? No, but I'm just sending like instructions, or like I'm just negotiating something that like I just have to get the terms across. I either accept them or come back with something like it. I think sometimes we really overkill it, because some of my projects I absolutely need Fable 5. It's going to get into the code base. It is going to solve some nasty bugs. It's going to detangle some things. It's got to really think of some good logic to help make my business successful. Other times, simple communications.
100%.
I'm just sending a message and it doesn't matter. And I think that's where Apple will be able to really thrive.
Yep.
What is the value for them? And I think there's a lot of different questions, except maybe the value is this is a good phone because it can do it for free. It can do it on my device. It can do it if the internet's really bad or slow, or I'm in a different country where I don't have reception. There's so many of these like edge cases where having an on-device AI does become, I think, very useful, even if it's not the top model, especially when you're in a pinch. And so I think for that reason, I would be excited if Apple is able to summarize my emails really quick, or help me come up with some responses, or help just with some like basic stuff, and I don't have to think about it or paste it anywhere or do anything, and it's kind of automatic done on my device. I think there's some use in that.
Well, I mean, it's edge cases for you, right? I mean, like for most people, this is their main
Sure.
thing, right? So like, so for you and me, and for a lot of our listeners, probably it's like, we want the top model because we're doing probably like higher order stuff. But like for a lot of people using AI, that's what they do. They search and they help it write a better email or something like that, and they help it, it helps sort of like remove a background in a photo or something like that. So this is going to be it really is going to be an interesting thing to watch, because if the Apple can sort of like crack that code and understand that this is what people, 91% of people just want that. I don't know. I'm sure Apple is doing what they do and all that kind of stuff. I just don't get how this is sort of like rolled out. I just don't get it, but I love to sort of see that they're still moving on this front. Listen, guys, quick thing before we wrap up is AI box. So as we sort of like every time we sort of talk about sort of like trying one model after another after a model, I always default to AI box. It is super quick. It's super cheap. This is sort of like this company that is absolutely crushing. This is Jaeden's software company that he's working on for years and years and years. But the best thing that I find out of it, and you can do this for like less than $10 a month, is literally just like sort of like comparing answer to answer to answer. This is what I do, jumping around from, paying hundreds of dollars a month, but also jumping from app to app. It's just one of my favorite things. I always try to throw it out there. I always try to squeeze it into a podcast, because if you haven't tried it, it's so worth it. And what Jaeden has built is always like totally awesome. Also, guys, we are so close to 200 reviews. My gosh, Jaeden, I think last count we were at 193 or something like that. So if you are one of these people, if you can just get us across the finish line to 200, I don't say we'll never ask again, but we will give you a break. We would just be so grateful.
Or at least one episode.
Just one episode. We'll give you a break. We'll give you a break for one episode. Guys, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.